in order to follow what I'm going to do in this video, you're probably going to have to watch this video first because it uses the endpoint of this video and the material that's been generated. Now, in this case, the light that's being provided, this blue light, is coming from the haze effect. But I'm not going to use that in this video, so I'm going to turn the atmosphere off. I'll set it to fully black to make sure there's no light leakage through the geometry there, and so we've got no light. I'm going to modify the material of the mirror. I'm going to use ambient output, so I'm going to blob in ambient, and I'll put another blob here, so it's going to be controlled by the alpha output of the material I'm going to make, and it's going to use bump. I'm not going to put any output in bump just yet because I'm going to use a bit of a trick to get some colours out of the bump, but we'll come to that in a second. So I'm going to get a material in here to use, a texture rather. So hold the shift key down, go into the library, select basic, and I'm going to use this one here, basic distance origin. I'm just going to quickly modify it to suit my needs. I want the first component only, turn off colour and alpha, switch on bump only, that's important, don't provide any other two. And then go into the noise function and switch it to 3D. And that's all the modification that needs. Check out of there, and you can see now that's got a little bit of a colour appearing in it. And by having this blob in bump, even though the bump isn't set, that will be driving that colour through the ambient channel, which is controlled by this edge, out to the material. But it's going to be quite a low level, and I'm going to have to set this value here down to between 12 and 13, so it works for me. Between 12 and 13, it's a bit fiddly to set that, that's good. Right, so in theory now that's everything set, and the global ambient colour is going to provide the output. As things stand, because of the high degree of interreflection and amplification in this, then it's hard to see. But if we go into the render options, we can drop this down to a more reasonable level. Let's try 12 for example. And if that's still too bright, then use the global ambient colour and turn that down and see if we start to get some kind of effect going here. Okay, so we've got some kind of effect going here. It's not quite the effect I expected, actually. So let's see what we've got. Object space. We've got a Y offset. I wasn't expecting a Y offset. I thought it was going to be zeroed. So the idea is to get this circle in the middle of each face. So let's try again. See if we're getting something like right. You can see something now. You can see some coloured stars, and the colours are arriving from the bump channel. This effect's a bit unpredictable. If you go into the Skylab, for example, and then check out, you will find that the colours turn off and you get a high frequency noise appearing in there. If you want them to come back in, if they get reset in any other way, like going into another material, but that's not much chance of that because this is the only object in the scene except for the camera, then just go back into the material lab and out again, and the colours will reappear. Right, but the other thing we can do here is we can use this bump height to drive the effect as well. So you can see, thanks to the linear nature of this transition over the distance origin, we can get quite an interesting effect. It doesn't complicate the scene too much. So that's looking a bit bright. As I say, there's a couple of ways of reducing that. One is to reduce the reflection property of the material, the other is to reduce the maximum ray depth, and the other is to control it through the ambient channel. So there's three ways there to adjust things. Another thing to consider when you've reached this stage is that we have the option of adjusting the way that the reflections work in Bryce through this handy little control here, reflection correction. I've described that in other videos, so we'll just say just switch it on and see what happens. So in this case, it's changed the way that the reflection responds, and if that's looking a little bit dark, I'll just increase the ambient effect there. The other thing to consider in this case is that you have the option, as well as using positive variations of bump, you can switch to negative variations of bump, and that gives you another way to modify the effect. If things are a bit dark, you can increase the complexity or increase the ambient output till you get some output where you can see things. So I'm going to do a mixture of those two things. I'm going to switch the ray depth up to 12, and that's going to increase the complexity, and you can see it's gone a bit bright. And the other option, as before, is to try turning reflection correction either on or off. So just try the opposite and see how that modifies the appearance of this. I'm just going to reduce the global ambient there, so that's going to provide less output for this to drive the effect, and so that will stop that getting too bright in parts, and you'll see more of the colours coming out in this abstract So there you go. That's a brief way of modifying the reflective material and using the effect of getting the colours from the bump mapping to create fairly complex abstract images using this effect. Obviously using different functions will have different effects, but bear in mind it's easy to overcomplicate this image by only using a very simple output like the distance origin. Then you still have a degree of structure that's visible, which seems to help with these abstracts, otherwise they just turn into a mass of reflections and noise. So there you go, that's the end of the video. Hope you found it interesting and that you'll have a go at this in your own renders.